I'm going to turn it over to Amy Sinclair. She is going to be the hostess to introduce our last storyteller, their shipmates. So it's only appropriate. Amy?
Thank you, Debbie. So I'm very excited to be able to introduce the next speaker. Her name is Ava Mandeville. Ava comes to us from Morocco, then via the UK, and now she's here in the United States. She has a rich history of sailing. She began doing some offshore racing, which is pretty intense, with one of the really well-known yachtsman ladies of the UK, and I'll let her go into that a little bit further when she tells her story. But I have learned so much from her because we're on the same sailing team. But I would like to introduce the amazing Ava Mandeville.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. So, as Amy mentioned, I've been sailing for a good few years now. I started in my mid-20s, which I feel is a little bit later than most people, but it was fun. And my beginnings were on this sort of tiny lake in the middle of a huge built-out area that was quite different from offshore racing. And I was quite lucky then to meet Marcel, whose photo you can see right now, who's a yacht master. So she teaches yacht masters to get their license. And I was very lucky to get introduced to her, and she was more than happy to take me on board for my first offshore race about 3 weeks after I had started dinghy sailing. And that was a tough experience. I was not expecting it, but on my way back, I realized that it was everything I wanted. And then from there, I was just sailing with her constantly for the next few years. About 8 years ago, and the story so it was on a relatively long distance race. It was meant to be 24 hours, and we were a crew of 12 people. None of us had really sailed together before. I knew one other crew member, and we had not actually sort of sailed together on that boat either before we started the race. So we just showed up with our kit and got going, which turned out not to be such a great idea after all. So we started in the late afternoon, and the conditions were pretty miserable at first. It was kind of drizzly and choppy, and the wind was so, and it was really reduced visibility. So, because we started in the late afternoon, nights came pretty quickly with a thick cloud cover, which, didn't improve anything. We were split between sort of two different watch crews, and I was on the one that the skipper had taken over. And he had this thing for sail changes. So every time we came up, we had to change sails, sort of regardless of really whether they were needed or not. But it kept us busy, and I guess it kept us warm. At the same time, this was nighttime. We had just started, and this was a crew that was unfamiliar with each other and unfamiliar with the rigging as well. That would kind of play a part, I think, later on into what happened. Night came through, everybody's pretty fine in the morning, but the sun came up, and as usual, when the sun comes up, everything felt a little bit better. Sort of the breeze had picked up a little bit, and we were going pretty well, except that it had now been about 12 hours in. We were expecting to finish the race in 24 hours, and we were a fair way off the halfway mark still. There was nothing that couldn't be improved on, with a bit of luck and the right tactics, I guess. We got ready for another sail change as the new March came on, and that's when we decided to put the spinnaker up, only to find that we didn't have any halyards left apart from the ones being used for the jib and the main. Every single other one had migrated at some point in the night up the mast, and we could have gotten stuck there. So that was not really a great place to be in, and the skipper was definitely not happy at that point. There was a bit of discussion, and we kind of went into, should we abandon the race? It might not be safe to carry on. What should we really do next? the decision came to really abandon the race, and we were going to start the engine, motor back to a home club, and call it a day. Except the engine wouldn't start, and we found out afterwards that the wiring of the electric fuel pump had been moved or dislodged at some point, but at the time it just felt like everything was going wrong at once. It was still moving steadily on the main and jib at that point, and since the home port was relatively close to the finish line, we managed to get everyone to agree then to finish the race. The skipper went on board with that. Only if we retrieved the halyards would have the additional lines, throughout the spinnaker and keep going. So we had this crew of 12, 10 men and 2 women, including me, with experience ranging from a few months to several decades. So at the point when we're talking about retrieving the halyards, which is the looking up that I was sort of told of, and I took it quite literally, I have to say. We had to decide who was going to go up to retrieve these halyards while the boat was still under sail, and everybody was feeling fairly flustered and probably a little bit angry. And nobody said anything. It was, I don't know, it can't have been that long, but it was a 4 minutes of sort of staring at each other and who's going to be the first person to crack and volunteer. And obviously that had to be me. And one thing, I'm sure that a lot of people here feel the same way, but I'm really terrified of the point of, I will start sweating, I will be shaking, I will really just feel like everything is shutting down. That's how terrified I am. I was sort of hoping that if I volunteered, somebody else would step up and say, hey, no, we're not going to let one of only 2 women on the crew to go do this, but that was not the case. So I was getting ready to go up, regretting opening my mouth to volunteer, but it had to be done and somebody had to do it. So we got ready to go. At that point, I had sort of talked myself into, I can do this, it's fine. Only to have one of the other crew members who had been off watch at the front of the companionway sounding very angry and asking why we were sending anybody up on a snap shackle. So that put a pause to everything, that got me panicking again because now I had time to think. And we kind of had a different knot, put it all together, and I was launched out very, very, very slowly because of how terrified I was. I was still pretty terrified. The panic did not actually come down during the whole way up. If anything, it got worse. But I eventually got there, and everything was kind of well jammed in, and it was tough to get any purchase to bring anything down. I think mostly because I was still shaky, and I just didn't have the strength really to kind of do what was needed to be done. But from that point all the way up, when we were still under sail, it was really one of the most beautiful experiences I've had. Everything was just blue all over, above us and around us, and the horizon was just, it felt like it was closer than it should have been really, and that we were just heading towards it. It was really quite amazing. But obviously, the point of me being up there was not to look around me. The point of me being up there was to retrieve those halyards, which I actually didn't manage to do in the end. So I came back down. Somebody else went up. Actually, it's Chris, who's sitting behind me there on that photo, and who finished the job I had started. And I would have liked to say, oh, I did everything by myself, and I managed to get everything done, but that wasn't the case. What it really taught me is just that it is possible to kind of try to overcome things, to try to do what needs to get done at a time when it's needed, and that's sort of the main part, as long as we kind of all work together to get there. And that's it.
It takes a huge amount of courage to go up the mast, even when the boat is sitting still. So why did you feel it had to be you?
Because nobody else would. And one of the things I had learned when I was sailing with Marcel is that she always said that the whole crew was one person, and if somebody was hungry it meant other people were probably hungry. Somebody was thirsty, it was the same thing. Somebody's tired. So you always have to kind of look out for each other as though you're just one person working on this. And so when I looked around and I saw that nobody else wanted to do it, part of being a person of 12 people was to just do what was needed.
So brave.
You're all in the same boat, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So we've got a couple of other questions, but first I wanted to take a few seconds to thank our crew behind the scenes, because I know people are starting to trickle out. Amy Sinclair, Amali from Clearwater, the sale logistics coordinator for the Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, Ian, who's been doing the backroom stuff from Dig Down Media. And I also want to thank all of our supporters who either went onto our website and used the donate button, especially the anonymous donor, Boat US, Offshore Sailing School, Blue Water Sailing, Lake Pleasant Sailing Club, Sailboats Northeast, and America's Boating Club. I want to thank all of them. I've got another question for you, Ava, and that's from Heather. And it is, what was the actual problem with the halyard up there?
Honestly, as far as I could tell, they were just jammed. We'd lost them, I think, overnight. People were not familiar with the boat, so didn't clip them back on properly, or things came loose. And that was that. I honestly couldn't say. They were just all the way stuck up there, and it took a fair amount of effort from Chris once he got up there to really get them down again.